Welcome to the Prelude to the Trade War series, part whatever, the 𝚆𝚊𝚆𝚏𝚎. This is the next country in the installment of the series. So let's just get into it, man. Let's just get into it. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Now, I have to make sure everything's all good to go, because, you know, that goes. Got my flanny on, I got my hair combed. And here we go. So, the 𝚆𝚊𝚆𝚏. It's a very interesting place. You'll soon find out. They are a little bit of a different type of people, and perhaps their involvement, we could say, in the trade war isn't so on the nose once it kind of comes to that point. So let's just get into who the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏 are and everything about them. Excuse me, about. I already ruined it, so here we go. That is a picture drawn by Kevin of the two pillars. This is kind of how the mountain chain begins, if you will. So if you stand at the most southern point of Voss, where Wulandia and Tantorum borders meet, and you look north, this is the kind of image you would see. And the mountains will just go on for thousands of miles. And within the mountains that divides the land are the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏 people. This is a king's list from recorded history to the modern era. Now, I'm not going to necessarily go into each one of them, but as you can see, you have the name of the leader, which there are no last names to these people. You have their rule, and you have a little synopsis about them. As you can tell, there's a few that aren't known, but most of them are descendant from a family line. But sometimes it can get a little bit muddy. So as you can see, first guy, this second one, the second king, called Haafi, was actually a nephew of the wife of the first king. The second one is a grandson of, then a brother-in-law, then a son-in-law, and as you can kind of see, they try to keep it in the family line. The king of the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏, but doesn't seem to work out the best sometimes. Now, when I think about the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏, they're more clan-based, yes, but there is a king of all the tribes, if you will. There's a few tribes, and in the tribes are the clans, but there's a major king that resides over the people here. Now, as you can tell, from the 1360 on is when the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏 family ruled. That is when it was legitimized, this family. Whereas before you can see son-in-law, son-in-law, nephew, blah, blah, blah. Now you're starting to see son of, son of, son of, son of. It was kind of a reform that was made around that time, and that would be due to the understanding of how the consciousness and the rule of people truly worked. The 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏 are a unique type of people, and we'll kind of get more into them as the slides go on. The Haafi. The Haafi emerged roughly near the War of the Gods, which makes them the oldest Aeonic race by uncounted amount of years. Basically, what I'm trying to say is the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏 people were the first people out of the forest, long before Tan and long before any other of the Aeon races of their significant forests. Like 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚆, for instance, of their forest, and the Islandi peoples, and the peoples of the north, with the Scapir and the clan people and stuff. These people somehow emerged from the forest during or near the War of the Gods, which was the war between the Aeonic beings and the Titans. So it's not really known when, but these are an ancient people. They are people of the 𝚆𝚊𝚆𝚏𝚎 Mountains. The 𝚆𝚊 people do not inhabit any other lands outside of the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏 Mountains. They are the sacred protectors of the mountains. At least that's what they would tell you. You never you will see 𝚆𝚊 like venturing out, trading, doing this and that, like normal guy stuff. But when it comes to the territory of the 𝚆𝚊, which is where the neutrality really seems to work for them, they don't do anything outside of when it comes to gaining territory of the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏 Mountains. You're not going to see the 𝚆𝚊 go like, you know what? There's mountains across the sea that are also just as big called the fucking Macedonian Mountains. Why don't we take those? Like, that's just not how they work. They're protectors of the mountains. They're a race of people created by 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏, and they protect the mountains for whatever reason. They are said to be Nueos, and Haafi was the son of 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏, brother of Tan. It's not really legitimate to say that. Like, if I were to have said that and we're in the world right now, like, oh, did you know the 𝚆𝚊 descend from the bearded pygmy and Haafi is actually a brother of Tan? The most tannic people would be like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's just not a shared mentality. Are the 𝚆𝚊 truly Haafi? Sorry, are the 𝚆𝚊 truly Nueos? I don't know. We'll have to find out. Maybe if we read the second book, we'll find out. You know, that kind of stuff. We'll get into it. Little historical disclaimer. Now, the Haafi are described as nomadic in the early peoples upon their mastery of the mountain beings, who would stride ease with the long, winding valley of 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚆. Now, when one imagines the Haafi, they see what they have become today. Great mountain builders, and learned the art of stonework, and have surpassed many cultures in the advancement of mountain living, as they would call it. These people live up in these places. So within the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚆 Mountain, too, there are valleys and lands, and mostly valleys, if you would call it that. They live there, too. There's lowlands and highland peoples amongst the 𝚆𝚆. There's a veneration of the mountain, though. And the mighty cities, most of the mighty cities are built upon the mountain. Much different than Lyria, where you'd see the Lyrians build within and underneath the mountain. The 𝚆𝚆 choose to construct with the mountain, outside of the mountain. So if you look in the background there and you see that picture of that mountain that's real, that I'm in a little disclaimer too, I don't live anywhere that has mountains. I would love to have went out and took pictures of my own, but I don't have it. I did a couple of trick shots of some, but I really wish I could have had more pictures of our mountains in the books, but Kevin only drew like 2 that I have, so I don't have any other ones to use. So we're going to see a couple of those. That's a disclaimer, getting that out of the way now. But back into it. Fake historical disclaimer. If you look in the distance of those mountains there, you imagine cities built on trusses and on these like causeways and these great bridges and stuff upon these mountain sides. Now, not on every peak, you know. Do I have my thingy here? Yeah, like you wouldn't see, like, here's the city right there. That's where it's hanging out. You'd see the cities built along these arms here, carving into the mountain and creating these platforms, these roads in these fucking great areas here or down here. You see how that's just a great rock there? Imagine carving into that and laying these giant like causeways, these giant platforms to which cities are constructed, these giant buildings that kind of coincide with it. That's just how they roll. Now, as it said, they stride with ease, these great beasts. Those are the spider mountains. Oops. Those are the mountain spiders that inhabit these lands too. Very rare creature to see anymore, but there was a time where you would see the 𝚆𝚆 people riding these great beasts and using them to transport these long legs. I mean, these things were huge. Now, due to the high altitude, the Haafi are seen as a sort of barbaric people, but this could not be farther from the truth. They have a rich heritage that stretches back as far as any other, or if not more. Though in scholarly circles they are dismissed as nomads and barbaric folk that held no great competent for the other Aeon races. This is in the past. They would just look at like, they're just like fucking mountain people. Man, they're just barbaric living up there in the fucking cold and the weird shit. They're just discounted peoples. Now, as you get on later, 1300s plus, you're going to see the 𝚘 kind of shape themselves into a modernistic mountain folk. And again, I've said this already 50 times, but we'll get into that. The truth is, they themselves are people that can trace their lineage back to the very Aeon 𝚷𝚘𝚊𝚍 himself. For it is a belief amongst the Haafi people that they are descendant of the bearded pygmy. Though many would argue against this claim, for there is no proof, and it holds no merit. So it's hearsay. Would the 𝚘 people tell you the truth? Yes, they would. But most other people wouldn't believe it. Again, it's like going into real history. Whenever you have classical sources, like Herodotus and Siculus and all that, they're like, I don't know. He probably just doesn't understand. He was never there, this and that. Like, it's that kind of thing. Like, well, we don't know. It doesn't say that they are a descendant from 𝚷𝚘𝚊𝚍 himself. Just dumbass shit like that. Interesting fact. Now, the 𝚘 are peoples that are most unlike the other Aeon, if not by their culture, but rather their sense of sound. They are in tune with the echo that can be heard, as they say, through the mountain. In fact, they would describe it as the heartbeat of the very mountain. It is through this sound that they measure the overall health of the land and surrounding area. In fact, they also write songs to the mountain as sort of offering to heal. The Haafi are quite strange, as seen by all other Aeon races. Most, in fact, write them off as their culture as a cheap superstition and pagan beliefs, though the Haafi would never know of the other opinions. They are for the most part, they are an isolated people of the mountains, guarding the ancient ways through the mountains. Now, that's just kind of how they roll on that fact, you know. They are in tune with some sort of harmonics, some natural harmonics that occur on the mountains, or at least they claim. And through that, they can listen to Gaia, Mother Gaia, if you will. And, well, we could just say we could be in tune with her. And like, it's very much of an Anaku thing. There is this kind of weird connection between these 𝚘, or the bearded pygmy, and Anaku. You see a lot of similarities. Even sometimes the actual ancient Anaku language is very similar to the modern 𝚘. It's like an offshoot of it. So like there's like cultural this linguistics. Modern Anaku don't necessarily. It kind of got, I don't know how to word it, because I wouldn't want to say Semitic, but if we're thinking about like the Sanskrit Semitic kind of stuff, what the 𝚘 speak is a very close relation to the ancient Anaku. It's like a branch off of that language tree. I did not go into all this stuff with it because it doesn't really matter, but just understand there is some sort of cultural linguistic connection between the 𝚘 people and ancient Anaku. Modern Anaku, not so much. They kind of formed something new to which they communicate, but in the old days, there was a different kind of belief. I have papers of the actual language. I kind of deciphered some of it. Thank you, Kevin, for making it. That was very cool. I'm kind of glad I found it. Like, for instance, one of the oldest words that most of the cultures use within the book for the sun is 𝚘𝚘𝚘. 𝚘𝚘𝚘 is an ancient Anaku word, actually. Torta is another one. Tantorum, Tortak, the realm of Tortak. That is an ancient Anaku word. Torta, which means west. I think there's only a couple. But anyway, the 𝚘 themselves are derived from that in some way, shape, or form. So as to their connection to the Anaku, not really known. Now, there is a couple things known about it, but we couldn't really say. If you do remember back in the Lyrian video, there is the connection between that prince of the Nuevos and the Lyrians, Well, the 𝚆𝚊 will talk about that in their sense as well. But I just wanted to paint that picture that there's some sort of similarity between them. That's why you'll see Lyrians and 𝚆𝚊s kind of enacting in the same way. There's a veneration of the land. Not to say that those in 𝚷𝚌 and Tantorum wouldn't venerate the land in some way, shape, or form, because I think Tantorum, when it talks about spirits, and you look at the crying tears of the Dracovian mountains, there's like this kind of ancient belief that they would have, and we'll get into that when we get into Tantorum, but they themselves kind of venerate it in their own way. But when we think about the veneration from the 𝚆𝚊 and the Anaku, we're talking about a preservation of the land because it is mother. Now, the Anaku would call the whole land mother, and it's interesting that the 𝚆𝚊 would say Mother Gaia. So Gaia Vala, Gaia is the name of mother, and that's the name of the mountains. Was it named by the 𝚆𝚊? Was it named by the Nueos? No, it was actually named by the Anaku. That's just another thing that they kind of share in common with them. And so that's why you'll see this kind of natural bond that can form between those two nations later on. There's just something in common that they share. Let us go on the next slide. Early culture. The Haafi people settled in the realm that was called Nora there, which translates in Anaku, Western Land of Gaia. The name was given the western place due to the 𝚆𝚊 migration out of the forest sometime before recorded history. So we'll kind of show where they would have come out through the forest and where they might have been. At this time, they are not a united people, and there are countless tribes that hold no allegiance to the other. So they are seen as lesser peoples because of this. Like early days, it's just like, these are just a bunch of fucking warring ass tribes just hanging out and doing their own little things, and not even a united people. An honorable, proud, and just people that are considered very forthcoming with their intent and domination of the land. They're a truthful, just people. They're honest. They're not mercantile. They don't have the ability to like, oh, let's fucking sell this and we won't tell him that we're lying. And they're less concerned with the monetary system that will take over the Aeonic peoples, this mercantilism. That is not necessarily a concern of the 𝚆𝚊, and another thing that kind of sets them apart away from what the other Aeons would say about them. Again, another reason why you look at them as barbaric. They're not prone to the same kind of greed that, let's say, Tannic people are, or for that regard, like Velour people, or what you start to see happening in Lyria. And those are like Anakus. There's some sort of great change that's happening throughout all of Atria, but the 𝚆𝚊 find themselves at the top and isolated from it. So they're the kind of people that are just a little bit different when it comes to that fact. Let's kind of get into where they came from and where they settled in some of their first cities. Here's Nora there, and there's 𝚃𝚊𝚆𝚏𝚎. This is the early 𝚆𝚊 territory. It was divided between the major clans and made up two tribes, Pygia and Nora there, and Scythia and 𝚃𝚊𝚆𝚏. The names are, again, these are Anaku words. Let's see. According to this, so that would be Torta, so west sun, something along the lines of western sun is 𝚃𝚊𝚆𝚏, and Nora there, as I said, is the north, what did I say? There. Northern something, I already forgot the fucking word. Oh, Gaia. Okay, there is Mother Gaia, so northern Gaia, if you will. Now, these are some of the early cities, and this is one of the oldest ones in Ladinum, that they were settling themselves in, and then they moved across the mountains there. This is cockeyed, so north is actually, that's north. This is the Great Trinity Forest here. And you could see that they probably would have come through this little valley here. Now, though on the map there, it's maybe hard to tell for some people, but there's quite a lot of valleys. I mean, there's one here. All this greenery between these mountains. These are places that they can traverse. It's a giant shielded area. You have to understand that. It's like the 𝚆𝚊𝚊𝚏𝚎 Mountains are the sacred place that hold the hidden valleys. Land of the hidden valleys. Let's call it that. Hidden Valley Ranch. But that's what essentially the 𝚆𝚊𝚊𝚏𝚎 Mountains are. They're the highest mountain peaks in all of Vas and Insar. Even more so the 𝚆𝚙𝚎𝚎 Mountains. They don't stand so high. They're just as long down there, but they're not as high up. But these valleys are significant. There's some sort of, how would I word this? Trapping of energies and of magic that happens within this realm here. This realm is considered Gaia's realm. When it comes to the protectors, which are the Haafi people that would describe themselves, they're the protectors of Gaia. Much like the Anaku. Much why you see a lot of Anaku just leaving them alone. You know who else lives up in those mountains? The 𝚆𝚎𝚎. Interestingly, the 𝚆𝚎𝚎, who don't like mankind, don't really seem to have too much of a problem with these people. So there's some sort of thing between them. So the Haafi people, these realm protectors, establish these cities. As you can see, Louet and Hastats and Tenay and Eladim and Solna. These are the first major cities, these ancient cities of Norter. But I wanted to paint it as like, this is not a group of people that are like, they establish these cities, like, okay, like let's expand, let's get all of the mountains. It is their sacred duty to protect the mountains, one that was given to them by a king long ago. But this is not their main, like, I don't know how to word this, man. They don't say like the mountains are ours. This is the 𝚆𝚊𝚏𝚎 Mountains. This is our country. They just venerate them and protect them. That's it. They don't have that greed within them. That seems to be bred from the Tannic peoples and all other Aeonic races. These 𝚆𝚊 seem to be kind of untainted by it. Is that because they don't have the darkness within them? Is that make them, and that's where you can kind of see through society, especially Tannic thought, that these people aren't Tannic. Well, sorry, Tannic. They're not related to Tannic people. Though the 𝚆𝚊 would claim that the Haafi would be son of Tan, brother of Tan, I don't think that the Tannic people would understand that. To them, it's like saying that Christ had a brother. They're like, nah, well, I mean, he did, but he was also a Christ-like figure. Like, no, there's only one. And then the Jews are like, well, no, he didn't happen yet. Like, that's the kind of thing with the 𝚆𝚊 and their belief system of 𝚆𝚆𝚏𝚎. In reality, they are 𝚆𝚆𝚏𝚎's people. They are the bearded pygmy. Just a little different. But here's generally the area in which you would see them settle. This is the ancient lands of 𝚆𝚊𝚏𝚎 Mountains, to which they came out of the forest from these rivers here. They ran through in this lake, and it opens up into these valleys, and these valleys are all connected. There's not a lot of places in here where, you know, like, oh, there's just like this random little fucking bowl out of nowhere of land that's like about 300 miles span, you know. This many leagues of just this isolated place through the mountains. That can happen. That is within the 𝚆𝚊𝚏𝚎 Mountains. But for the most part, these sprawling fucking valleys are all connected. It's amazing feat. And this very, very, very fertile land, from all these great resources in the mountains, you have all these minerals too, this runoff minerals from the heating and cooling that enrich the ground in that area. So this is a very, very key place for the 𝚆𝚊. And you can see that they don't really necessarily need from other cultures. They're not, like Adrana is a country that needs from others. Where they're at, they're, you know, the heights that they've risen to and the population they have, they rely a lot on trade, outside trade. You don't see that in them, like with the 𝚆𝚊 people. They have everything they need within their realms. They have ancient stories of mistakes, like when this small village who had this abundant resources were trading with outside people. Eventually those resources ran out and they were starving to death. But they had all these great jewels and all these great metals around them. But they couldn't, those metals, those jewels couldn't keep them alive. So the mothers would die with the jewelry all over them, starving to death, because they traded away all the resources. The 𝚆𝚊 people understand these mountains are sacred. These resources stay here. This place is holy, at least during these times here. Let's show the two tribes that I'd mentioned, the 𝚃𝚘𝚎𝚕𝚎 and the 𝚃𝚘𝚎𝚕𝚏. Let's show them all the clans within those tribes. Eventually, in time, these are the only tribes, and they branched out. So you don't see a creation of new tribes. In the early days, when the 𝚆𝚊 founded those two realms there, we're talking an unaccounted like history. We don't know if it was the year. So the time begins in year 1 after Exodus, right? And that's when Tan exited the forest. This is before that. So it's not a counted time where I can tell you. So that's why there's no time with the 𝚆𝚊 still. But these are the two tribes and the clans within those tribes that would later still be prominent tribes in the 𝚆𝚊. Those names, how I said 𝚆𝚊 don't have last names, those are the last names. If you're in tribe Kinna, you're not like your name is Dora Kinna. You're just Dora, or whatever your fucking name would be. These last names don't mean anything. It's tribe names. Sorry, not tribe. It's clan names. You have your first name, your given name. That's your only name. The king is called 𝚘𝚊𝚏. So right here, the 𝚘𝚊𝚏, 𝚘𝚊𝚏 the third, 𝚘𝚊𝚏 the fourth, 𝚘𝚊𝚏 the fifth, 𝚘𝚊𝚏 the sixth. Kenatu, the first, the second, the third. You know, it's like that. Your name goes away as a king, and you become the clan name. Now, these two tribes, so who is the king of the tribes? They don't have a king for each tribe. That would be the actual king. That king list I showed you, Suliyuma, the first or second, who's king right now, he is the king of the two tribes, the 𝚃𝚘𝚎𝚕𝚎 and then the 𝚃𝚘𝚎𝚕𝚎. Those are his two tribes, to which the kings of each clan are his kind of moot, if you will. So again, it's barbaric, is it not? Like if you were to imagine high culture of Tantorum, Adrana, or like Dubois, or Trovia, or even Lyria, it looks a little barbaric. It's just kind of like, like it's old school, I guess. There's some similarities to the south in Ansar. Southern Ansarians, or the Tannic Ansarians, if you want to call them that, they would kind of see the 𝚆𝚊 and it would just click to them. In Adrana and Tantorum, though, they'd be like, I don't know, like, these are barbaric people. Early growth, motherfucker. The many clans were to be divided amongst the land in order to serve Gaia. So that's you and your clan go where Gaia needs you the most. They were seen as shepherds of the mountains and grand protectors of her glory. At the point in history that Tan would emerge from the forest, the Haafi people were around for a possible 1,000 years. That's hearsay. I can't prove that. Or at least that was what the old stories say. The Haafi would have seen the exodus of man and May from the forest. This is just like, they would have seen the writing on the wall. And again, I think when it comes to the reasoning for the Haafi's kind of non-involvement, this neutrality that they kind of had always, not only is due to the fact that they were ancient peoples before and alone, on these mountains and learn to dwell upon the mountains and not become part of all the scheming that the Aeons and the what the fuck they're called, the Anaku, would get into. That's kind of affected them. This kind of like, they're not getting involved in any of this shit here. They have kind of become one with the land, and all these games that are played amongst the Anaku and the games that are amongst the Aeon and all that stuff, it's not really something that they want to get involved with. They have a job. They have a purpose. When I say that they are said to be the Nuevos and they're to be the bearded pygmy and they are descendants of 𝚤𝚘𝚎𝚍 just as much as Tannic people, when the Tannic people in like Censium society, the high Censium society, the scholars there, they like fucking hell no about that. You would see the same thing in the Edenian understanding. But the raising the Hafal don't care is because they're not involved in the games of that. It's not a competition to them. Like, who are you and where do you come from? Prove this. And the mapping of history is something that is Tannic. This is not something that Fel really... They have their ancient stories. They have their belief system, and they know who they are. They are an ancient people long before counted time. They're misunderstood. It was the darkened King 𝚿𝚛𝚎𝚕 who had a fate encounter with a Lyrian prince. That's the story of 𝚿𝚛𝚎𝚕 and the prince, the Anaku prince, whose name is forgotten to history. There is a connection between the Lyrians and the Hafal that date back before the counting of man. It was in the time of Tan's exodus from the forest and banishment of the Lyrians and Jinjin. The story said that the Jinjin were betrayers of the king 𝚆𝚅𝚅, for it was they who allowed the Lyrians to protect the strange new creatures created by 𝚤𝚘𝚎𝚎, and that's because of a man named Quinlan. So it was the Lyrians who were seen as betrayers of the Titan's decree that the forest only belonged to the Anaku, an ancient pact that was established some time ago by 𝚃𝚛. Interestingly, the first people, the Nuevos, the bearded pygmy, saw all this happen. The bearded pygmy were said to have been created by 𝚤𝚘𝚎𝚎, the forgotten king, long before mankind. It was his first creation. Some said that they just disappeared, like he made them and he hid them away. Some say that they were destroyed by the Titans during the Great War of the Gods. There's a lot of different individual stories as to what really happened. But what is believed by the Haafi people is long ago in the forest, when mankind rose, they were found by Quinlan. And Quinlan stayed his hand and did not destroy them, even though he was tasked to do so. Something stopped him. In time, he would use the Lyrians to hide these people. And in time, it was discovered when these people grew and they became what would Tan and his people, to which the story of Tan happened, which I will do a reading eventually, so you can get an understanding of the beginning of mankind. But just know that Lyria and the Jinjin are connected to the creation of mankind. These brothers of the bearded pygmy. They were banished henceforth by King 𝚆𝚅𝚅, the king of the wood, the king of all Anaku. And somehow it was this 𝚿𝚛𝚎𝚕, that aided these fleeing Lyrians, because it was King 𝚆𝚅𝚅 who said that they must be destroyed. They aided mankind, they aided the forgotten king, who is this evil fucking person, and they must be taken away. Now, the Nuevos were also beings of 𝚤𝚘𝚎𝚎, though they did not ever dwell in the forest, and it was the first King 𝚿𝚛𝚎𝚕 that would take pity on the poor Lyrians, for he knew it was they who saved the brothers of man. This 𝚿𝚛𝚎𝚕 acted through the voice of Dove and the voice of the forgotten king to save these people. There was some part to play in the grand scheme of it, At the time, they were just doing what, their creator said, Oapake, save these people from the banishment, from the destruction that will come to them. And so these Jinjin tribes and these Lyrian tribes were cast into the blame of it. And when the king of the Lyrian was killed, the first king, this prince, this is where the story happened, is the prince and all his people were led from the forest, much the same way that Tan was by Dove, but instead of Dove, it was this king. To which the intervention of the pygmies' trickery led the exiled people from the forests and saved them from assured death. It was said he cast a spell on King Peldog and his forces that were in chasing of these people. So imagine this exodus where thousands of people are on the run, like Moses with his Jewish people, and the Egyptians are chasing them. Same story. They're just in a forest, though. And it was the pygmy who created this spell. And this spell was this mist of fog that surrounded the entire forests, the outside of the forest. And when they fled, it caused confusion amongst King Peldog and his forces. And they couldn't act in time because they are not allowed to leave the forest. That is a banishment. They were not allowed to chase them outside of the forest. This great fog, this great wall of fog still stands today. If you were to go to the ancient forest and look at Trinity, you'd see this wrap fog around it. Now that's what the ancient story says. Anything more than that, it would start ruining the story. But just know that 𝚷𝚛𝚎𝚕 aided these fleeing Lyrians. Is there a connection between 𝚷𝚛𝚎𝚕 and Quinlan? Most definitely. Most definitely. Quinlan, as I said before, is an Aeneran sent from another realm. He is Gandalf. He is fucking Gandalf helping the hobbits. The hobbits are the Lyrians. Gandalf is Quinlan. That's all it is. But Quinlan was supposed to destroy mankind, did not. There's a huge connection between the 𝚘𝚊, the Lyrian Anaku, and Quinlan. There's some sort of Trinity understanding there. But to go into that more would mean I have to tell you the story. And if I tell you the story, it means you won't buy the book when I sell it. So we'll get into that eventually. You'll find the answers to where they lie. Though Tantorum and the Aeven of Adrana do not recognize that the Haafi are indeed the descendants of Haf and his Nueos, they are treated amongst both races as people with a rich heritage. Nonetheless, they think they're barbaric. They'd say, well, but they do have a good heritage. They do know how to make some really awesome fucking stone things. Like, they made a stone throne for me that was so polished and so beautiful, you wouldn't believe it. You know, they're respected in that regard. Though proving the relations of man will never be settled as seen by Tantorum and the southern Ansar colonies, as well as Adrana and their outcasts of the Merphos. Basically saying there that there are so many divisions of mankind, it's impossible to say who's what. You have Tantorum, the original people of Tan, and then you have this offshoot of Adrana, which are the Adenian people, which are the descendants of Tan as well. But then you also have the people of the Merphos, which are outcasts, but there are people there that are descendants of Tan as well. Then you have the southern states and Ansar, which are people derived from Tan as well. And then it's like the story of the descendants is a major one. I do have a video about the descendants. Maybe I'll go back into it again to really help paint this picture better and show you each individual understand the descendants. But just know that the people of Adrana and the southern nations and the Merphos all can claim lineage back to Tan through bloodlines. Obviously, Tantorum can as well, but they don't have a ruling class the way that the other nations do. Just keep that in mind. And the Nueos people that became the 𝚘𝚊 is a brother of, and the kings are descendants from. So if you think about it like this, you have Tan and you have all his siblings. Well, next to Tan, you should have a line drawn that says Haafi, his brother, to which his siblings all are the kings of the 𝚆𝚊, the bastions of the mountains. All the same, the Haafi people are proud and have achieved more than any could hope for in the understanding of the Creator. Just give them credit where credit's due. That's all they ask. Let's get into their religion a little bit. The religion of the stone. Here's a quote. It is said that warriors were long ago cast into the stone, awaiting to be awoken again. Those warriors of old that would one day lead the Haafi people from the darkness and help them conquer the known world. Now, the people of the Haafi do not dream of world domination per se, but this was one of the ancient prophecies that was scribed long ago in the hidden texts. End quote. They would be an important little group of people that will become relevant in time. Those people, as described there, were first discovered by a man named 𝚿𝚛𝚎𝚕. Interestingly. Very interesting. That is the story of 𝚃𝚛𝚎 and 𝚿𝚛𝚎, who are sons of Tan. The story of 𝚃𝚛𝚎 and 𝚿𝚛𝚎 are the origin stories of 𝚷𝚆𝚊𝚆𝚏𝚎 and 𝚃𝚏𝚎. So Tan comes out of the forest, forms the realm that would become 𝚃𝚏𝚎. His son, 𝚃𝚎 would take the realm. It's 𝚿𝚛𝚎 who is concerned with other things, and he searches for some things, and eventually he comes upon these people here that are described. But I couldn't tell you that story because then, it just would ruin it too. The religion of the Haafi is based around not only this warrior cult, but also in the rock itself, and also many ways to do with agriculture, architecture in general. The grand architect. They base all their religion beliefs around the concept of masonry and the crafting of hewn stone. For it is the Haafi people who revere the stone, for obvious reasons, as it would be the base of their entire culture. All the 𝚆𝚊, yeah, I knew that's what I was going to say. All the 𝚆𝚊 own everything to the stone of the world, as they call it. They owe everything to the stone of the world. Not own, ass faggot. To which the belief that all the low places of the world can be connected like great roots of a tree. They are not unlike the Lyrians in that way, a respect of the mountains. But at any rate, the Haafi people revere the rock, but they mostly revere the ones who would return. It is in this legend that they place all their hope, for the silent invaders that probe their lands have become more of a nuisance in the south. That would be 𝚃𝚏𝚎. It's their brothers and all that shit, but 𝚃𝚏𝚎 is expansionistic. They're expansionistic Tannic peoples. It's within their DNA. Now, there were the Haafi people revere the stone, as it's said. To them, it is the life force of all. The stone are the compounding of all the experiences that guy would ever have. That's what it is. And to them, stone of the world would be this heart. This kind of belief that that is the heart of everything. Most of the time when we think of someone who reveres land and who reveres the world as a god, there's a different description to it. You know, we would see it in the forests, which what the Anaku are truly in belief of. But there's something different about the stones of the world, to which that would be where memory lies. And so this connection of the stone religion of the Haafi people is a direct connection between, let's word it as, that is where the truth, like you can harness what the world is from the ancient stones, because it gives you an example of what came before. And when you look inside the rocks, so you know how like in augury, they would look at is that the one where they look at the entrails and try to decipher the future? And then the ones, or is augury with birds, I don't remember, where you look at the birds in the sky and you're like, well, I'm determining by the way they fly, this is going to happen, you know. In When Sensing the Future, you must look through the past when it comes to the stone culture and of the Hafel people. So opening of the stones can reveal what had happened in that land. And they can determine from that point what will happen to the land. Much like geography, right? No, geology, the study of rocks. It's essentially that, but if it was a religion. Now, what did that one part say? These people that was talked about, these warriors. Though it may not seem like it, the Haafi people are seen as great warriors. They are very competitive people. They fight a lot. That's just what they do. But they don't fight a lot like for nothing. Fight is a sport. Fight is a way to hone, and fight is a way to establish dominance, to fight each other like that. Now, that's just how those people are. So when they revere these hidden warriors, you can see the way that they form their military around that concept of the hidden warriors, the warriors of the stone that will come out of the mountains and to aid them against the usurpers, or the interloper, whatever. That is just a part of a belief system that has become how they fight. They fight very much the same that Illyrian would. Why stand out directly and fight your enemy when you could hide and destroy him with ease from a distance? It's like, come on, that's obvious. Now, because of the reverence in the stone of the world, they carve and create many objects and items within, not to mention the grand cities that are hewn from stone. The art of stone homes have become lessened as they replace structures with kramos and bragier. We're talking about kramos is a type of metal, and so is bragier. That's kramos is like their version of bronze, and bragier is their version of iron. Most found objects in the mountains of Kalevala. Still, stone monuments can be found everywhere of the stone, which are the warriors of legend and the silent god. That's just what those warriors were called, was the stone. This is an interesting thing, though they consider themselves sons of 𝚆𝚊𝚆𝚏, they don't call him that. They just call him the silent god. What connection does that have with him? I don't know. The silent god is a creator. An aeon, that's name has been lost to time. This is why it's interesting that that's something given to them, because they don't want to believe that he's an 𝚆𝚊𝚆𝚏's children. So they give him the name of the silent god. This is something bestowed upon the people. And I guess they kind of went with it themselves. The name, okay, he is the silent god, because he has been silent to us. His image can be found all around the temples and governing buildings in any Hafel city. Worship to this deity is a practice that is also lessened of late. In fact, religion in general has dwindled. The idolization of the builder is what the Haafi concern themselves with anymore. So going from this warrior kind of idolization and the silent god, this point in history, through their kind of timeline, it kind of goes away from that and into the builder. Who is the builder? The builder is a simple man. It is the worker and the one who creates a nation. It is any man who dreams to make what is his own, and the tools are his hands, ready to make that which he dreams of. The act of in itself is what helped create a nation, as one of great determination and pride. The Haafi people pride themselves with hard work and dedication. It takes all workers to succeed. This has been most crucial for the Haafi people to stop the clan fighting and destruction, to unite them in a common goal. And that goal can only one day lead to the freeing of the stone that hide away deep in the mountains, waiting to be awoken. They really hone in on the idea of the builder. The builder is the average man. The builder is the one that helps create the nation. The builder is the everyman. It is the working man. It is the man that can help create this place. And he can help hew the stone to one day awaken the stone, to save them. They're like this apocalyptic kind of horseman that will be freed. A religion that's devoted around the idea that You are a worker and you are a builder. And if you could find a way to free these men from this source to which we covet, they will come and free us. And that's essentially it. They just consider them the builder. That's just the basis of their religion. We're getting almost into known history. So the first 800 years is kind of lost. So that's why we're just talking about this stuff in general, to give you an understanding of what was kind of going on and what will continue to go on. I just wanted this to be a basis of that. Known guilds and factions. The Architect Union. The high architects and engineers who serve the king and their nation. They're just like, that's how they look at it. So you have your king, and you remember how you have your clans. This would be like the retinue around him, the Architect Union. These are the people that are considered the seers, thinkers, and foretellers of the realms. Now, the Ḥafel people aren't necessarily a people that are like what we would imagine priests. You imagine the ancient priests around the kings. This would be like the architects. Because if you think about the builder, and you think about the people of the stone, you think about their veneration of Mother Gaia, and the understanding that within the rock is the answer of the future. Well, why not would their priest be like an architect? A stonemason. A one that can understand the engineering feats for which their culture is much, much based upon the materialistic kind of, I wouldn't really say materialistic, but materialized, non-ethereal. Does that make sense? Like, their culture is based around what can be created with hand. It's dwarven-like. It's not based around the concept of what this divinity may be and where the afterlife will take them. They are creating with, in some sense, the afterlife all around them. Is the best way I can think of to describe it. Underneath that would be the foremen, are the overseers of the cities. So these are the guys that we would call kings of these cities. Well, okay, let's word it like this. You have the king. Underneath him, like around him, you have the architects. Below them would be the actual foremen. And these are the people that are, I guess how we would describe as mayors of the city. Does that make sense? They are ruled over by the clan kings. So you wouldn't see clan kings owning cities. Clan kings have territories within realms. The people that are in charge of cities are these foremen. They are local governing lords. Now, since the Ḥafel are prone to building these men, these men are chosen by the king to maintain and run his country as foremen to do the job on the job site. So the nickname foreman has been adopted out of jest, but it has stuck over time. That's the simplest way to put it, man. You know, king who divides his land up to the two tribes, and each tribe has clans. And then they just watch over it. But the people that are actually in the cities are the foremen. Stonecutters are the ones who handle and maintain the massive hammer, a ceremonial task that is year-round, as they claim. Clean, care, and repair the mighty hammer. It stands as a symbol of the nation of Ḥafel in Eladnim. These select few are hand-chosen by the king himself to be his royal cutters. That stone, that giant massive hammer, pounds on the stone to ceremonially try to free the stone, the people, the warriors that were trapped. The workforce is the people of the Ḥafel that are ready when called upon to serve their king and country. This could be in a great building project or even the defense of a nation. It is a badge of honor to be counted as one of the workforce. A paramilitary group that are trained in the finer arts of war and construction as well. They are not outright warriors, but are shown the art of builder war, which is the process of using the mountain and her traps to slay their enemies, or even the creation of traps and devices of defense. That's how they roll, brother. The people are kind of conscripted into this service where you're half builder, half warrior. It is part of their culture. It's just how that works. 800s. So now we're getting into the fucking time of history where we can see their interaction on the big stage. As we stated previously, the Haafi people have very little recorded history up to the 800s AE. Everything I talked about previous was creating their culture in your mind so you can kind of imagine these people. Thusly, we're going to go forward. It seemed lands were divided between local tribe leaders that pledged their allegiance to ancient family names. No information as how the names came to be. Family, inherited, adopted, or created. So it's basically saying like, okay, like, so they have these two tribes and all these clan names, and there are their family names. Do they inherit it? They don't seem to know. Everything's gone quiet and unnoticed as usual. Though in the mid-800s, they began to notice outside world growing around them, and their old friends, the Illyrians, would soon emerge. Growing in quiet. There seems to be trade that might have passed back and forth between the Haafi and the Illyrian people before the official record of Illyrian states they're entering into the world of Aeon. Though for the next few hundred years, as a nation, nations of Aeon and Illyrians grew, so did the 𝚆𝚊. It was an age of enlightenment, one in which raging conflicts between Tannic races were the only active wars seen. I'm basically saying from the 800s to like the 1000s and into the 1100s, the only real people fighting were those, Atrian and Tantorum, where 𝚆𝚊 were just quietly growing. Their culture was quietly getting bigger. Their domination of the Gállvala Mountains was growing more and more, which more realms are being enveloped. Not a lot of written history, so I can't go into like, oh yeah, so like in the year 890, this guy did this, which caused this rebellion. Like, there's nothing really known. If I'd tell you right now in real life, like the Picts, what were they doing? Like, you don't know, but you know they existed, and you know what might have been their outcome. This 𝚆𝚊 are kind of like that. There's nothing that they're going to divulge out into the Aeonic world. It would appear the 𝚆𝚊 did not trade away too much of the resources for fruitless gems and gold. Remember that story I told you? They were a people that only wanted one thing for trade: guaranteed freedom. Let us get into guaranteed freedom. This is something that the 𝚆𝚊 people value more than anything. If you were to come to their land, this is what they'd ask for. To be left from the devices of rulership and expansion. They were a neutral people that revered the mountain and the creations that they so made. The 𝚆𝚊 people were builders, and they would create the metals and stones, immaculate constructions, from chests of drawers to the walls that created from the mountain itself. They were builders, man. They weren't concerned about that shit. They are a people that are extremely warlike, but do not practice the art of conquering. If their armies are called upon, they only ask to be left autonomously as a consolation. Damn it, man. I don't know why I couldn't say that. They're like a hired army. You could hire the 𝚆𝚊, but they're not going to claim lands. When you think of like the Scythians and like Alexander the Great, try to conquer them and realize, holy fuck, these people are great. Scythians didn't want to conquer lands much like that. They wanted to be left the fuck alone. That's the 𝚆𝚊 people. Okay, like, you want these resources, we'll be willing to give them up if you just leave us the fuck alone. You want some of our warriors to help in this? Okay, well then grant us autonomy. Do you want, like, that's how they work. That's just the way the 𝚆𝚊 are. They don't seem to, they want to be left alone, they want freedom. They understand they're in a world of other people that can affect them. And there are nations that might be stronger than them. Like Tantorum, for instance. But they can be worked with. And they need to learn to work with Tantorum, because You'd think like, well, why doesn't 𝚃𝚎𝚎 just march into the fucking mountains and just take them all over? There's reasons behind that. I'm going to show you a little bit of like their juxtaposition though. So obviously the countries are in each color. And the Murphos isn't necessarily an outright country. It's just there are people that live there. And this would be circa, like 600 or 1600s. But you can see they're between everything. Even the Dark Trinity Forest, the Cursed Forest now. They're surrounded on all sides. They are the dividing factor of everything. All of the world is divided by these people. These people that venerate and protect the mountains are also the ones that are the gatekeepers of all-out expansionism. As you can see, every realm there expanded to which their borders could no longer. And that's just something of a, let's just say it's kind of a constant threat. And when we talk about that threat, there was conflicts between 𝚃𝚎𝚎 and Adrana that affected the 𝚆𝚊. Because, that would be the War of �8s, which happened between 850 and 1137. It's this constant conflict that would go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, like this War of Roses. It's like this Punic Wars, actually. It's more like the Punic Wars. I'm going to hold on for a minute. God damn it, Galco. Fucking shit. Anyway, it's like a quasi kind of Punic Wars, is what I'm trying to say, between 𝚃𝚎𝚎 and Adrana, between the Romans and the Carthaginians at that point. Though imagine, instead of the Mediterranean, the fucking, what's between them is the Murphos and the 𝚆𝚊𝚆𝚏𝚎 Mountains. Because 𝚃𝚎𝚎 can't just march through Lyria, well, they can't go this way. They can't go through the forest. They can go through Wolandia. They could, or go through the mountains here. This caused a lot of irritation. You could walk through the mountains, and if, you are places where the 𝚆𝚊, like, average people or castles or, I don't know, some other kind of place, they don't, like, it's not like they, like, sense through it necessarily. They can, but it's not an active thing. So 𝚃𝚎𝚎 would constantly through here, which is Gale, they would find ways and go through these mountains and try to get into the, the river here, which is the Unfans River, and they could get to Adrana there. And so there was some like naval conflicts that would happen here on the river. Some conflicts off in the Murphos here. This is Thales Respite, they call it, this portion of the 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚆 Mountains. Conflicts happen down here as well. You'd even see conflicts kind of come up here. Now, the major one that happened is actually we'll get into, which was the most costliest encounter of the War of �8s. But just know, during that time, 850 to 1137, as the 𝚆𝚆 were growing, these two nations were at war with each other, and it wasn't like all out, like, oh my God, it was millions of death. It's just these constant conflicts. There was a gentlemanly war. I will wage it here with you. You will wage it there with me. We're talking maybe 4,000 on one side at the most. You know what I mean? It's not giant scale conflicts. It's just a series of events within this few hundred years that just ramped up, and the conflicts were really tight. The War of �8s was considered the portion within the 808 Years' War. So 𝚃𝚎𝚎 and Adrana were at war for 808 years. The War of �8s was a period that you'll see that it ramped up. Every 8 years was a major conflict, and we're going to get into one of them. There's a timeline for you there. War of �8s is a gentleman's conflict that was waged between 𝚃𝚎𝚎 and Adrana that consisted of skirmishes and small-scale battles in the sands of Murphos, Wolandia, and the valleys and peaks of the 𝚆𝚆. as well as the 𝚘𝚊𝚛𝚎 River, like I said. This caused the 𝚘𝚊 to establish a strategic mountain defense. It's like, okay, well, this is going on, and they're like, think they could just roam in here and just take. They don't see the mountains as our realm. You look at that map there; it showed everyone has their own color, but where's the 𝚘𝚊's color? They're not. They don't have a realm. They're just barbaric people that live in the mountains. We can go up there if we want to. The first one to go up in the mountains and try to destroy Tantorum was Dovkan. What was his name? Markethos. He was the first one to try to take his armies through the mountains, but he'd never made it. It was seen as an invasionary force by the 𝚘𝚊 people, so they kind of whittled him down through the miles of these valleys and winding paths and stuff. It's not a respected place, and so that's why the forces of Tantorum and Adrana would fight in those areas. Adrana not so much as more the Tantorum. The Battle of Kakin in 1128, so nearing the end of the conflicts, was the most significant battle between the Tannic peoples since the first clash in 850. And no battle reached the dangers in 𝚿𝚛𝚎𝚕 since. This was the high point. This was like the fucking Gettysburg of the battle here. Thus, the 𝚘𝚊 secured their borders in time and would be seen as a sad time for the peoples of Tan. Now, let's kind of get into a little bit. And I actually have it's not animated, but I can kind of show you movements of the battle scenario, the strategy, the strategic map, if you will. 𝚘𝚊 bolsters the mountain passes. After that conflict, the major one, when the victorious Tannic forces walked these passes for the final time in the year 1128, after the Battle of Kakin, they were countless times cut down by falling rocks and piercing icy winds. For no matter what culture tries to cut through the mountains, they were always doomed. None have ever made the journey again with an army. Deeming the mountain impassable, the Haafi would never say this was incorrect. The story was said that Gaia herself was angered by the forces of Tan, and she cursed any who walk her paths and valleys with death. Passing through the mountains was sacred. Some who believe it said it was the 𝚘𝚊 who called the mountain down around the Tantoric armies, but that is not understood. So after this great last battle, that was one of the last times you'll ever see conflicts in the mountains, so in 1128. Let me get into the actual battle here. Now, this realm here, this is the 𝚘𝚊𝚛𝚎 River. This is 𝚘𝚊's respite. Okay? Now, the green forces are Adrana, and the red forces are Tantorum. The initial conflict started down here in Gale, and this is 𝚘𝚎 River. So dividing the 𝚘𝚎 River are the forces of Tantorum and Adrana, initial combat. Here's their reserves pushing up. Eventually, this conflict right here would push the forces back into the 𝚘𝚍𝚎 Valley, to which they were ambushed by these forces here from this outpost. Now, I don't have exact locations of all this stuff, but you're just going to have to look at the map yourself and find it. Once they were being ambushed here, this force moved their way up to the Crimean Valley to reinforce with these guys here. Now, I don't have names of battalions and all that shit. That's not my specialty. But just know they were going to be reinforcements right here because the Adranian forces that moved into the 𝚘𝚍𝚎 Valley set up a defensive posture and were being attacked on three sides by these Tantoric forces. Now, up here, they decided with their reserve forces that are coming in from the Navy, they would attack this defense settlement here. Tantorum had a habit of creating these fucking settlements up in these mountains, much like the Romans would do if you think about in our real world. At that point, when they established that, these guys had to pull back from the fight and come up and try to aid in this right here, allowing the reinforcements to come in here, to which another battle was fought by 1, 2, 3, 4 battalions of the Danian forces and 1, 2, 3 battalions of the Tantoric forces who had the upper hand because of their experience with the forces that usually come from here, called the Dracovian Heights. Eventually, they would pull back. This was a victory here. These forces would retreat, and then they would link up, and then all would meet here, to which eventually the Aedenian forces would get back on their ships and flee. So it was seen as a Tantoric victory. It was so fucking messy. So fucking messy. Not outright, kind of. And I wish I could have given you a better explanation of it, but you will see that again when we talk about Tantorum on Prelude to Trade Wars and Adrana. It's not really important now. Just know a conflict happened here, and Adrana forces fled. Tantorum were then cut down by the 𝚘𝚊 in time. So, let us get into the relationships between the Haafi and Adrana, just to understand where we all sit. Now, Adrana and the 𝚘𝚊 have a pretty decent working relationship going forward. After all this dust settled, Adrana really made sure that they allied themselves with the 𝚘𝚊, and they would trade with ease at their respected borders of the Haafi people. Now, I want you to understand that between the 𝚘𝚊 and Adrana, they're so similar in that fact. Adrana kind of chilled themselves out when it comes to the conflicts in time. And they kind of took a back burner. They kind of like set off in the back. And how you would imagine America during World War I before that, you know, or in World War II. They just kind of like, I don't want to get involved. I'm going to sit back here. They were more concerned about the mercantilism. They were more concerned about making profits. And so they really worked well with 𝚘𝚊. They left the 𝚘𝚊 to their devices. They recognized them as their own free state. And they enacted that policy to say that they were. Now, in time, when the trade wars would rage, Adrana, like the 𝚘𝚊, would not directly be intervening, but instead bolster their alliances and capitalize on the power vacuum that is being established. They, mostly on Adrana's side, they just took that opportunity to say, like, let's gain allies while they're all busy fighting. Let's make some more money. Let's we can use this as an opportunity to rise up. The 𝚘𝚊, not so much. Though the reign of the 𝚘𝚎, however, in the beginning to take shape of the consciousness of the people during the mid-1600s, and a closed border mentality would grow and harsher border checkpoints would be established. Nothing to do with the 𝚘𝚊, but Adrana started to kind of close off a little bit because of the 𝚘𝚎. That's a whole ass thing. When we get to Adrana, we will talk about that more. The Snake's Mouth realm, which would be the place where the relations would strain the most, and that's the tippy-most point of the 𝚘𝚊. The Gáibhla Mountains. It looks like a snake's mouth wrapping around a little lake. That lake town is a town in the Aedenians, and then the mountains is a city of the 𝚘𝚊. They're like it's a weird border right there. And this realm would be the place where the relations would strain. For the beginning of the mountain is where the 𝚘𝚊 city Danur meets the Aedenian lake town of 𝚘𝚎𝚎. How do you say that? 𝚘𝚎𝚎. It would be the hub of trade, and also where the relations would clash in the coming years. Can't really get into that, but that is a point of contention later on. So what about the relationship between the 𝚘𝚊 and Tantorum? Well, it has been quiet for some time, and the Chancellor of Tantorum has maintained a good working relationship with the Haafi kings. They understand that trade of valuable resources is the key, with the promise that they would never invade. They never would invade. How do I word that? They would never invade again. They can secure a border. The times of the 1600s are getting volatile, and they need more than ever secure borders. So because the Chancellor Van den Stier, he's starting to see that, you know what? Shit's ramping up with fucking Lyria and Wollandia and some fucking weird stuff. I don't even know what's happening. We don't need the 𝚘𝚊 being an enemy right now. We need it to be let's be chill with these guys. Though, when a coup of Gearlor was discovered, this was an issue for his son Vathia, for he was tasked to form an alliance with the Haafi people. though he would discover that the Haafi might be aiding Lyrian forces by allowing them through their lands and around the defenses of Tantorum. This is hearsay. So Tantorum was under the control of a chancellor named Vanensteer. It was discovered that one of the greatest Dukhans, named Geirlor, was possibly staging a coup to which Geirlor was put on trial. His son Vathia was tasked by Geirlor, who had no knowledge of this coup, to go up into the mountains and form a relation with the Haafi. Now, Vathia was just a soldier in the army, essentially. He was a leader. And he had no knowledge of all this stuff. But when he discovered that there were Lyrian forces that would be moving through the mountains, then there's something going on in which he needed to confront the Haafi kings, or the kings that might be involved in this. Is there a takeover going on? Is something happening within the Ḥafel Mountains? Are there certain clans that seem to want to take power again? Who knows? But that's where we're going to start getting into during the trade war times. There is a beginning of some darkness happening. Now, though he would discover that Ḥafel might be aiding Lyrian forces, blah, blah, blah. With the sudden outbreak of the trade war, Tantorum would push into Lyria lands and once again into the Valons. The Ḥafel would not directly be involved in this coming conflict. It would be after the trade wars that the relations would worsen, which they might not be repairable. So I'm trying to set up that right now, early 1600s, they're trying to be cool with each other, but then the trade war happens, and that's when everything starts to fall apart, where misunderstandings are formed. Much like you would see in Lyria, you're going to see it in the Ḥafel too. Let me show you, next slide. That is the known realms of them. So they're independent realms. Warwatalik of the north, you got North there, Tora Cremo, Weowokanu, Merodella. These are all, again, a Naku word. Next slide. The grand cities. Let's kind of just talk about visually the grand cities real quick so you can get an understanding of how they look right now. This is in this era, 1600s on. The Haafi would invite any to their home. However, they would always seek to show the glory of their marvelous cities, for they were an architectural achievement that no one ever has surpassed, with their steam rail cars and elevators that could carry thousands. The Ḥafel cities have been called cities of the clouds, for they're always flanked by massive clouds. Peoples were always in wonder as to how they kept their capped cities so warm high in the sky. In fact, the cities could even be described as rather hot to some people. Like, the cities have these massive domes, much like you'd see in Etrovia, and that would keep these cities just warm. It's so weird to imagine like these bubble cities that are coming out of the mountains. You look out in the harshness of the mountains and this ruggedness, and you see these perfectly spherical domes, and underneath them are these like giant fucking buildings and massive cities with huge causeways and giant ramps and rail cars that are like on these wires that run from peak to peak, and you see like these machines that roll between. Like, this is a very highly advanced people. The grandest city of all is Aladnum, and it is that city that people are marveled at the technological achievements. For eons, the city is the grandest display of the might that is the Ḥafel people. Giant towers jutting out of the mighty rock that flank vast sprawling buildings atop massive platforms that are accessible from the valley below by steam elevators that can carry armies if needed. The whole city is capped by the Ulacan glass that shimmers the translucent light from the rays of Kremos. It kind of reflects them off. The whole city in this looks like it was some sort of trick of the eyes, and the dazzling colors gleam with such brilliance as it is wrapped by the icy cold clouds like tendrils grasping around its every edge. This is a crazy fucking sight. Like, for barbaric peoples, like, they are pretty crazy. Last slide. Let's talk about the governance a little bit. I'll probably put this one out of the order. The governance relies on municipalities, which happen to be the governor of each city. Like I said, that was the one guy. So local governance of the cities and surrounding territories would be under the High Court of 𝚆𝚊𝚆𝚏𝚎. So this is the actual. Remember how I said like the architects are the one around the king, and underneath that are the foremen. Well, this is the High Court of 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏. It would consist of 6 men that were hand chosen by the king 𝚃𝚊𝚆𝚏 II upon his ascension to the crown. So these are the people above the foreman. So above the mayors of the town are this court of 𝚆𝚆𝚆𝚏, these 6 men that oversee each realm. These members, as they were called, would form the law and order of their respected realms. That they would converge often to discuss matters of the nation with King 𝚃𝚊𝚆𝚆 II when needed. They served as lawmen and advisor to the king, and play a massive role in the structure of the nation. Outside of that are the builders' union, who preside over all constructions and labors of the nations. That's that retinue I told you about. These special few are the highest engineers and architects in all of Atria. So basically, like I said, like those are the people around there that are this visual kind of understanding of what is this country. This court here are the people that are the law bringers that are separate from the clans. The clans are their own police force of each realm. And in each realm are the actual the foremen that are running the cities. These 6 are the ones that divide the realms up and create the laws, and they are the law and order of everything. Now, so engineers, architects, Atria. In fact, their union produces much of the engineers that help build other empires, like those in Adrana, for instance. Though in this union are the politics like that have never been seen. These grand builders also act as diplomats or emissaries. Like I said, those architects are like emissaries and diplomats. For upon their arrival, they are not only to oversee the construction efforts, but also get the ear of the lords of the land. Let me just paint it like this. These architects that are around the king can be hired by other countries. I'm in Adrana. I'm trying to build a 𝚘𝚘 canal, or I'm trying to widen the canal. You can hire these guys to do that, and they'll oversee it with pay. But you know what they also do is they have the ear of the king during that time too. So they act as emissaries or diplomats in that manner. Oh, so now that we're talking, this, and that's going on, you should think about this, or our alliance with that, or let's make trade deals here. They act as this double kind of thing there. It's very unique. So imagine that. Like you hire this architect that is on the retinue and on the payroll of the king, but he also can be hired out to do construction jobs, in a sense, to bolster communication and to bolster relations between nations. So it's very interesting the way they work. And that's fucking that. That is the 𝚆𝚊 people. It's very unique, is it not? Just how it all works. I think about them, and then I know I didn't really get into the nitty gritty of like, here's what their clothes look like, and here's like, when I imagine the 𝚆𝚊 people, I just imagine kind of like, let me see. I don't know what I imagine visually. I never thought about them visually. I wanted to give you just a good sense of them. Their history is not much the same as everyone else. I didn't really go into year to like I did with the Lyrians and all that, just because that's not 𝚆𝚊. They're not those kind of people. They're merely just leave me alone if you can. Also, I have some people that can help build that thing, and maybe they'll talk to you about some things. So hopefully this has been a good description of the 𝚆𝚊 people. I really hope. I mean, this might be the longest one so far. I don't know. But anyway, thanks for that one. And I wonder who's next. Possibly Wulandia? I don't know. Until next time.